Matt Matera, my guy from Pewter Report. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well, Jay. How about yourself?
I am so excited for this game tonight, bro. And I
Me
know
too.
there's just like so many people inside the hockey world, outside the hockey world. Like, I know you, I saw you put something last night on social media about it. Like, this is, regardless of what else is going on at 8 o'clock tonight, like, everybody's going to be locked in this US Canada game. It's coming at the perfect time. There's not really much else going on.
Yes, it's got that big fight feel. Even the first game when it was USA against Canada, I remember having goosebumps, like just seeing the crowd going crazy. Obviously, the three fights in 9 seconds, the Kachuk brothers, everybody getting into it. I am so thrilled for tonight. The representation as well, a lot of Lightning representation. I'm a Penguins fan, so obviously Mike Sullivan being the head coach. I know the Lightning claimed Jake Kensel, but let's remember where Jake Kensel won a Stanley Cup. That was with
Right.
the Penguins, and then obviously with Sidney Crosby on the other side. So I am so thrilled. I'm very excited. I hope USA wins. I hope they dominate again, and I hope the Kachuk brothers are in the mix. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I know, man. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. And it's just different. It's a different kind of excitement. You know, I was there for Stanley Cup wins and Super Bowl wins, but this is just something different about this, Matt. Your allegiances are all crossed, right? It's the first time in my life I'm rooting against guys like John Cooper and Braden Point. So, you know,
Yeah,
to have that, it's kind of funky. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know a lot of
of
people,
course.
you know, still talking some NFL action with, I want to talk about the wide receiver position first. People looking at T. Higgins. I had my guy Rick Ucchino on earlier this week from Cincinnati. It looks like Cincinnati's going to find a way to try to keep T. Higgins. All those people are like, oh yeah, he could go to Jacksonville, go to New England. All signs for them up there point to T. Higgins returning, and I think we have something similar down here, where a lot of signs point to Chris Godwin returning. What would it take for him not to be back with the Buccaneers for the 2025 season, you think?
Contract talks, extension talks breaking down at the end. Obviously, they pushed the void date back to the start of next year, which is March 14th. It would have to take just the distances being so far away on each side, with either the number of years that Godwin or the Bucs would want under the extension or the amount of money per season. But I just don't see that happening. So it would have to take breakdowns in those talks and another team just willing to give an ungodly amount of money to Chris Godwin, where it's an offer that he can't refuse. Maybe it's Jacksonville or Las Vegas because of the ties to Chris Godwin, with Liam Cohen being the head coach in Jacksonville, and John Spytek taking over as general manager for the Raiders. The Commanders are another team that I would be slightly concerned about, just because their cap room is pretty good. It's pretty flexible, if I'm not mistaken. Chris Godwin is from Delaware, which obviously isn't Washington, D.C. or the Maryland area, but it's like in that Northeast area, kind of the North area, where maybe he'd want to be a little bit closer to home. And the opportunity to play with Jaden Daniels, who obviously is electric and winning Rookie of the Year. But all of that said, I would be very surprised if he's not in Tampa.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I feel like, and I had Greg Allman on yesterday saying, I think he wants to go the same route as Mike Evans, man. I just think he wants to be a Buck for life. He loves it down here. I think, you know, when you look at that, you say, I will have no issue with that. And I think in a weird way, the injury may have helped the Buccaneers when it comes to leverage in this point, because if he really tore it up last year and he didn't get injured, maybe he prices himself out of Tampa Bay. You agree with that?
I completely agree. And the comparison to Mike, don't get me wrong, we love Mike. He's a future Hall of Famer, everything like that. But let's not forget, up until Godwin got injured, it was Chris Godwin that was the locomotive of the passing game specifically. He was top 3 in receiving yards up until he got injured late in that game against the Ravens on Monday Night Football. So part of the intrigue for Godwin to specifically return to Tampa, and I get it's Josh Broussard calling the plays, but Josh Broussard was here last season, is he's going to be the focal point. But if he did not get injured, who knows? He could have led the league in receiving yards, been up there in touchdowns, been in the top 3. That would have changed the game a little bit, especially if T. Higgins goes back to Cincinnati, because then teams would be throwing so much money at him, where now it's a little bit similar to the last time he became a free agent, is how does he bounce back from this injury? Obviously, the Bucs have a little more intel being with him every single day and seeing how he's rehabbed and worked out. But yeah, a little similarity there for sure.
Matt, we're starting to see some mock drafts as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. And one of those mock drafts, or a couple of them, Have the Bucs possibly taking a receiver with that first round pick at 19. Give me the plus minus, the good of the bad, the positive and negatives of why something like that would work or would be a wrong move for the Buccaneers.
Well, if Godwin doesn't return, and I feel like a lot of these mock drafts were kind of predicated with the Bucs specifically on Chris Godwin going somewhere else. But not all national media kind of knows the ins and outs of the Chris Godwin situation like Tampa media does or local media. So with the predication of Godwin not returning, it makes total sense that the Bucs would go and draft a wide receiver in the first round or maybe even in the second round, just considering the longevity of the most important offensive position besides quarterback, because Mike Evans has one more year left on his deal. We don't know how much longer Mike is going to be playing for. And now if Mike wanted to come out and say, hey, I want to play up until 2028 and then go into the Olympics, kind of like what he talked about at the Pro Bowl, well, then that would change the Bucs' plans a little bit. But you also have to factor in for, is he going to play at this high of a level in 2 or 3 seasons from now? You don't want to be in a situation where after this season, Mike Evans retires or isn't playing in Tampa anymore. Chris Godwin's on another team. You're down to Jalen McMillan as your number one, who had a great end of his rookie season. And then you're in a spot where you're drafting a wide receiver, and hopefully he pans out as a number one guy. So I am still a fan of, even if Chris Godwin comes back, you want to replenish that wide receiver position, because as important as defense is, and we know the Bucs have all these struggles on the defensive side, the regular season is a little bit more about offense, and then the postseason is where the defense really shines, and that decides who's going to the Super Bowl and who isn't most of the time. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rules. So I'm still a fan and an advocate, as Paul Heyman would say, of the Bucs still replenishing the wide receiver room. And if you draft one in the first round, and this is all on best player available, if they find an edge rusher at 19 that they think is a great fit, well, then go with the edge rusher because we know of the issues there. But if they have their guy at wide receiver at 19, it shouldn't stop them, because then he comes in, he battles with Jalen McMillan, for wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4. Trey Palmer doesn't look like it's necessarily going to cut out, but that's fine. He was a late round pick anyway. Then you set yourself up with great depth for this 2025 season. And then whatever happens with Mike Evans after that, you're going into 2026 with Chris Godwin as your number one under contract for probably 2, maybe even 3 more years. And Jalen McMillan, let's see what he builds off of from this season, and a top round talent as your wide receiver 3, maybe even wide receiver 2. And 2 of those 3 are on rookie deals. So that's a pretty good scenario going into 2026. And I know that's a long ways away from now. The negative would be, well, you have a lot of holes to fill on the defensive side. Edge rusher, corner, linebacker, even a safety next to Antoine Winfield Jr. Do you want to keep pushing that aside? Well, I would argue that's what free agency is for. And you have more than one pick. You can address a lot of these other positions and players in other rounds. I mean, we saw impacts from Tyke Smith. He wasn't a first-round pick. So I just think the Bucs shouldn't turn a blind eye to a very important position on offense just because they have all of these issues on defense.
Yeah, even the quantity of issues would be one thing if it was 1 or 2, but just because you have to fill so many holes, I think I jive with you if they filled some of those holes in free agency quicker, right? If they went out and said, we're going to go get an inside linebacker and a corner, I'd be like, okay, well, you're helping out here. Now, if you don't draft an edge with that first pick and you wait till the second pick, then I would be okay with that. But take me through how they have to fill out those other spots then, Matt, because, and we'll start with, let's go with the edge. Where are you at with the edge now? Because there's a couple of different scenarios. Do you go and trade for a big guy like a Myles Garrett? Do you wait and go for a veteran guy like a Khalil Mack? Do you try to get Shaq Barrett 2.0 and get like a Joseph Osai from the Cincinnati Bengals and go, hey, him with more of an opportunity, he'll be able to take that next step? Or do you address it with that first round pick? What door do you open there?
I would open the door of the proven commodity, because we've seen the Bucs try to build their outside linebacker room through the draft, and specifically through the draft, it hasn't panned out the way that we would like to. Now, everybody will point to, hey, JPP and Shaq Barrett. JPP was traded for when he was on the Giants, and Shaq Barrett came from the Denver Broncos, where John Spytek previously was. So he had a closer eye on Shaq Barrett than half the teams. But the guys that they've drafted in Jason Light's tenure, Noah Spence didn't work out. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka did not work out. And Chris Braswell right now, I don't know. He's a second-round pick that got less and less playing time. As
I didn't see enough. Did you? I
didn't
see enough in year one.
I'm still of the belief that he can improve and get better. But what I'm saying is right now, Yaya Diaby's the only proven guy as far as a draft pick that the Bucs can say, hey, we got a guy that we like moving forward. So I don't know. To me, it's risky to draft someone at 19. You may like them, but then to come in and try to develop this guy, who's your other starter after Yaya Diaby? Is it re-signing Anthony Nelson? Is it going back to the well with Shaq Barrett? So I want the proven commodity. Does it have to be Myles Garrett? No, not necessarily, because that's going to cost a ton of draft picks, and we know how Jason Light loves his draft picks, and it's going to cost a ton of money as well. Now, you could argue for sure, hey, he's a game changer. He's the best edge rusher in the league. No doubt about it, but you got to make sure it's the right price. Pewter Report has floated out a lot, trading for Trey Hendrickson, because the Bengals are in a tough cap spot. They want to bring back T. Higgins. They want to sign an extension to Jamar Chase. So their defense is already bad. How much better is Trey Hendrickson making it? If they want to give up a first-round pick this year and maybe some type of pick next year, like a third or a fourth rounder, I'm in for that, because the last two seasons, Trey Hendrickson has reached 17 sacks. That's not combined. That's the last two seasons. So yeah. I get why he gets overlooked, which is crazy because he's in the AFC North where there's TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. They're taking all the headlines, but Trey Hendrickson's been just as good. Khalil Mack, I am a fan of. I know he's older, but remember, he grew up in the state of Florida. The only thing he hasn't accomplished in his career is winning a Super Bowl. Why not end your career in your home state with a team that's, in the Super Bowl window and has reached the postseason 5 years in a row? I don't love the idea of like over $20 million per year, but if it's a 1-year deal, you're one and done, and that's fine. Right. So I'm all for the proven commodity. How they go about it, there's a couple of different ways, but they need a proven guy, because Yaya Diaby, I like him, a little bit more of a second outside linebacker who's going to be that alpha in the room.
Yeah, and I just wonder where, like, I get worried, the older that these guys get, because you very rarely see that kind of like upsurge again. So you look at a couple of years ago, you're like, yeah, Khalil Mack, not too bad 2 years ago, where he had in 2023 all these sacks when he had 17, but 3 years before that, 9, 6, and 8. Last year he had 6. I mean, to his benefit, he played 17, and 16 games the last 3 years. But I'm with you, man. Like they have to make. When we look at this Buccaneers pass rush, Matt, I don't look at it as a pass rush or a team that goes, hey, we bring young guys in here, we develop them, and then boom, they go somewhere else. We see that with like the Rays with pitchers, right? The way that the rehab pitchers. We don't see that with the Bucs. So I don't know if we can really trust right now. Maybe the different coaching staff will do that, but you kind of almost have to go for a high commodity, right? Because they haven't been able to develop some of these guys.
That's true. And this is the first year in a couple of seasons where the Bucs can go and make a splash signing, whether it's at outside linebacker or corner or another position, because the past couple of years, they have gone bargain hunting and they found great deals. I mean, again, Baker Mayfield, when he first got to Tampa, everybody knows, it was a $5-6 million deal, and he eventually parlayed that into a $100 million deal. And the Bucs have been so focused on re-signing their own guys for good reasons that they haven't had to make that type of splash signing in recent years, and they've been successful and consistent in winning. But if you truly believe the Super Bowl window is open now, and they're in a better financial spot now than they have been in the last 2 or 3 seasons, we all know about the Tom Brady tax and paying that off and all of that stuff. Now that you have a little money to play with, if you believe you can make a run at a Super Bowl, you have to dive in a little bit. You can keep developing, and that's very important. That's why the Bucs, their biggest signings have been re-signing guys. But enough with the bargain hunting. Go to the Gucci store, go to some of these nice places, and make one splash signing and treat yourself, as they used to say in Parks and Rec. Like, buying nice stuff feels good. Do it with the player and make your team better at the same time.
Treat yourself. What a great time. What a great what was his name again? Aziz Ansari's
Tom Haverford.
Tom Haverford. Oh my god.
Yeah. And Rhea was her name, like that's the actress's name. I forgot what Donna, I think her name was on the show on Parks.
Yes. Treat yourself. Oh my
Treat yourself.
God. Donna was fantastic. She was great with her Mercedes and everything. It was really good.
Yes.
But yeah, all right. So let's talk about the interior linebacker position. You look at some of these names. One guy that's on the list that I really thought that Jason Light could have brought in last year was Robert Spillane. I loved him from his time, with the Steelers and then with the Raiders. Like, it's a tackling machine. You need to bring in a guy if you're Jason Light that is gonna that's gonna get 100 tackles next year, right? Like, I mean, you need a guy that's gonna be able to go in there and be able to play with Levante David or without Levante David. But I think they need to invest a free agent pick and some draft capital on that interior linebacker position, because it's really been a precipitous fall off the cliff since Devin White was balling out in 2020, right? Because even when he wasn't in there, KJ Britt did a decent job, but I mean, by the end of last year, it was like, man, we got JJ Russell and you got a bunch of special teams guys playing in there. They have to get stronger in that spot.
No doubt about it. I completely agree. I think they're going to flood the inside linebacker position specifically, but I think they should at a couple of spots as well, like the secondary too. But as it pertains to inside linebacker, to me, I find it a very interesting spot. So I just talked about like making a splash play, going to the Gucci store, all that stuff. I do feel like inside linebacker for the Bucs specifically is going to be the one spot where they do a little bargain hunting compared to going for the top guy. Now, everybody's talking about like Dre Greenlaw and Nick Bolton. Greenlaw is a very interesting situation. He played at the 49ers. He tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl 2 Super Bowls ago, and then only played in 2 games, kind of recovering and not putting it all together. That's a tricky one because he's coming off of an injury. I know it's a year later, but like Nick Bolton, the Chiefs inside linebacker, is all the metrics coming out is like that he's going to get $15 million per season. I don't think the Bucs should go that route, but there are a couple different guys, and I'm glad you brought up Robert Spillane because he was on my list as well. 29 years old, but 158 tackles.
He's a machine, Matt. He's a machine. Yeah,
he is a downhill guy, physical. He's a thumper. So he's interesting for sure. And I think what's important for the Bucs this year at inside linebacker is they are pretty much revamping the entire room. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Levante David, but outside of that, JJ Russell will compete for a spot on this team. But like you said, he's more of a special teams guy. Outside of Servassier Dennis, there are no guarantees on this inside linebacker room. And I want to believe Servassier Dennis is the guy. He's pretty damn good in pass coverage, but he's been injured over the last 2 years. So you can't trust him to be out there for 17 games. So Spillane, if you want a run-stopping guy, I think is very interesting. A couple of other guys. Tyrell Dotson, a very peculiar case. So he began last season with the Seahawks. They cut him. Ended up going to the Miami Dolphins. He had 3 interceptions with the Dolphins in half a season. He's 26 years old, so he's on the younger side. Had an 82.9 pass coverage grade based on Pro Football Focus. And I know Pro Football Focus isn't the end-all, be-all, but that's a pretty damn good grade right there. And it would be a very cheap option. Another guy, Jamie and Sherwood from the New York Football Jets. I know there's a lot of bad things with the Jets. He was a very, very few bright spot for that team. He also had 158 tackles like Robert Spillane, was a safety, became an inside linebacker, and he does not have a lot of wear and tear on him because he was playing behind C.J. Mosley, but Mosley got injured a ton, especially last season. So he started a bunch of games, had 158 tackles. The only issue for him is that he comes from a 4-3 defense that didn't really blitz their guys a lot. You remember the Jets defense from 2 seasons ago when Bryce Huff was a big thing. All they did was just take their front 4 and go after the quarterback. They didn't blitz that much, so that's something to keep in mind. But those are a couple of players that I think if the Bucs want to go bargain hunting, not pay more than $7-8 million per year, those are some guys on my radar that I think could work out for the Bucs if they do end up hitting free agency and want to go to a place where they have a legit shot to be a starter versus in some other areas.
Yeah, I like the kid out of UCLA, Schlesinger too. If that's the option that they want to go. But yeah, they got to make improvements. And then you mentioned the secondary too. I look at corner, another safety. Like, how do you see that whole thing shaking out as well? Because do we know the future of a guy like Jamel Dean? Do you think they move on from him? And if they do they bring in another type of guy like that, whether it's in the draft? Because they find those mid-round, corners, they find those mid-round offensive linemen, but do you continuously go with those, 6 foot and above corners that maybe don't have the best ball skills, but are really good at tackling and coverage, right? Or do you kind of switch it up a little bit and go, hey, we'll go with we'll go with a guy maybe that's 5'10", but he's got incredible ball skills, maybe different than what Todd Bowles has done during his tenure with the Bucs.
I would like the Bucs to mix it up a little bit, but Todd Bowles has a type when it comes to corner. You just mentioned it. A guy that's over 6 foot, a little bit taller and lanky. So I don't see the Bucs going away from that. The case with Jamel Dean is super compelling. It's super interesting because, yeah, they could save some money if they let him go, but they're not creating a crazy amount of cap space like they would, in other years, or how they traded Carlton Davis last season. I don't think there's necessarily a trade partner for Jamel Dean. So how much better are you getting with another corner that you bring in? And I think it would be a veteran. So with a lot of these positions, I think whether it's outside linebacker, corner, safety, and inside linebacker, 2 of those spots will at least be filled via a veteran in free agency. I think there'll be one big-time guy and one, like, middle-of-the-road type of signing, kind of like how Jordan Whitehead was signed to a 2-year, $9 million deal. It's not exactly chump change, but it's not the biggest headlining free agent signing either. So corner, I think they should go with the veteran, but then also draft one. Again, maybe round 1, 2, or 3, depending on how the board pans out, because you've got to set yourself up for now, but for the future too. Jamel Dean, I don't know how much better he's going to get. He consistently breaks down, and he doesn't take the ball away. The Bucs need an absolute ball hawk, whether it's at corner or whether it's at safety. So to me, whether or not Jamel Dean is on this team next season, it's an absolute coin flip to me. If they go to the veteran route, I like Charvarius Ward from the 49ers. He fits the size requirement for Todd Bowles. I would like him. But like DJ Reed from the Jets, a lot of people have said, I'd love for the Bucs to get him. He's a shorter guy. He's a great player, but he doesn't fit that billing for the Bucs. So I don't see them going after him.
Matt, before I let you go, I want to ask you about that other guard spot. When you look at 4 of the 5 spots, I think we know what they're going to be. It's going to be Barton. It'll be Malk. It'll be Gedeke and Tristan on the outside. But that other guard spot, who do you think is going to be eligible, whether it's internally or externally? Do they address it in free agency? Do they bring Bredesen back, or do they try to, maybe take I wouldn't say a top round draft pick, maybe a mid round draft pick, or a guy that I've been, not yelling about, but also saying like, hey, they liked him in the beginning of last year, was Elijah Klein. So, he's still there. He's still in the room. So how do you think they'll address that other guard spot next to Graham Barton?
I think their first plan will be to bring back Ben Bredesen and give him a little bit of a raise. I thought he was very solid. Maybe pay him about $4 million next season if he wants to come back, and we'll see what other offers he gets. I don't think it'll be a gigantic free agency pool for him specifically of other teams that are going to want him. So I think the first step would be go after Ben Bredesen. If not, Elijah Klein showed his versatility. When he played at UTEP, he came from a very run-heavy type of offense, and we know the Bucs are going to run the ball a lot because of Bucky Irving and what they did last season. Klein would certainly be in the mix. I think it's either re-sign Ben Bredesen or draft an offensive guard or an offensive tackle and kick him inside, and then have a competition between that drafted player and Elijah Klein. That's probably the best way to go about it. One last thing really is there's a lot of appeal for other free agents on the offensive line to come to Tampa Bay because you have a top 3 offense in this league, especially that likes to run the football. So I think the Bucs will have a better options this year than they did a season ago or even 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, I like that. I like the ability to kind of keep your options open there. And that's one position group. You're not worried about Grizzard, right? Coming in and running too much of a different offense, or because I know obviously there's some carryover. He's going to put his own kind of spin on it, but I feel a lot more optimistic knowing that he's probably going to be a lot more like Liam Cohen and not as much like Dave Canales.
For sure, especially after getting to talk to him in his introductory press conference and a little bit after as well. The fact that he was here last year, I think, is really assuring to Bucs fans, especially with the passing game. And I like that he has come from different offenses as well. Remember, he spent some time in Miami under 3 different head coaches, which is crazy that he, was able to get through all of that because that's just not how it works in the NFL. But I like that he comes from Mike McDaniel a little bit. He'll take some from Liam Cohen. he wants to get a little more vertical too with the offense in the passing game. So I'm excited for what he can do. We've seen the Bucs be able to work it out with the first-time play caller, and maybe there'll be some growing pains, but I'm confident in Josh Recher, no doubt about it.
Matt, what do you got up right now on Pewter Report?
We have gone through a lot of free agency options on the defensive side of the ball on our podcast, Pewter Report podcast. So we're going to be tackling edge rushers today on the show. And next week, we will be in Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. So talking to Todd Bowles, Jason Light, getting a lot of info from there, talking to prospects as well. We'll see what the Bucs are interested in, who they're interested in. So a lot coming up on pewterreport.com and our YouTube channel, Pewter Report TV.
Go check them out, man. They do such a great job. Matty4_Matera on all social media platforms. Matty, Scott Reynolds, and the entire crew over there. Matt, appreciate you, brother. Enjoy the rest of your week. And, yeah, have fun watching the game tonight, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Jay. Take it easy.
You got it.